Hello and welcome to the 21st Annual Exhibit of Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technologies. We've been here for quite some time talking about the developments in this field. It is a very vast field with some very large players in it. Up next on the stage is one of those large players from a very large company. People all know it. It's Markus Bachmeier, and he's head of hydrogen solutions at the Linde Group. Please welcome with me Markus Bachmeier.
Hey.
So, hi, Markus.
Hey.
So we have a long history to cover. First of all, Linde has been involved in the gas business and in hydrogen for quite some time. Can you give us a little historical perspective?
Yeah, but it's been over 130 years. The company was founded in 1879 by Carl von Linde, who at the same time was a university professor. He was an inventor and he was also an entrepreneur. And his first technologies were about cooling machines. And based on those cooling machines, he developed air separation units, which is very simplified, speaking in a very simplified way, which means cooling down the ambient air to a point where nitrogen and oxygen get liquids, and because they have different boiling points, you can separate nitrogen and oxygen, and you can use it then for all different purposes, including nitrogen, for example, for fertilizer plants and stuff like that. We've been using hydrogen as an industrial gas for around 80 to 90 years. We've been active in hydrogen fueling technologies for over 30 years. So that's the background, and I don't want to go any deeper because we'd easily use up 20 minutes on all the achievements of the past years, but let's look at the future, shouldn't we?
Okay, so, well, we can start with the present. So
yeah.
Hydrogen is actually everywhere. So Linde's involvement in hydrogen didn't erupt out of the energy crisis, if we can call it that. So there are industrial uses, there are all sorts of chemical uses, food industry, and so on. Your particular involvement is in hydrogen and mobile applications. Do you have various sectors that you're involved in? Can you describe what you do particularly?
Yeah. So our team mainly works on hydrogen as a fuel, which predominantly means passenger cars, and we've seen many of them out there. You can drive them out there. Whenever you have an opportunity, drive these cars. Yeah. That's very convincing. It's also buses, and you've seen the bus from Cologne out there, which is a hydrogen bus as well. We work in material handling, and we work in other applications, but it's really passenger cars, transit buses, and material handling, which are the main areas where we see where we focus our activities in terms of hydrogen fueling.
So whenever we talk about hydrogen, I find it important. You know, where does it come from is one issue. We have so much to talk about. We don't really need to focus on hydrogen production. But one is simply how to distribute and how to get it to the consumer of mobile applications. So we can talk about a grid network. There's a gas grid. There's an electrical grid. Is there a hydrogen grid, or is it being created as we speak? And what about fueling stations? I mean, everyone knows how to fuel their own car. It's not that long ago, though, that when you went to a gas station, there was someone there who had a degree in how to fuel a car. It's like, when is it going to happen that you can drive up and everyone will have their own expertise on how to fuel a hydrogen car?
Yeah. So that's been like 5 questions in one?
At least.
So let's start with the sourcing question. And then the question, how does the hydrogen get to the station? So there's many ways of doing that. The first is really to produce hydrogen at the station. We've built a station for Vattenfall, which is a big utility in northern Germany, in Hamburg. You may have seen pictures of that. It's called Hamburg Hafen City, a harbor city, where there are 2 electrolyzers at the station, and those electrolyzers use wind electricity to generate hydrogen, and then it's being stored, it's being compressed, it's being fueled into buses, and it's being fueled into cars. That's always a question of how much space do you have at the station and what kind of electricity hookup do you have at the station. If you decide not to produce it on site, you need some way of transporting it. So there's different ways. If you talk about small to medium volumes or small volumes, these are typical trailers you see on the road. They say Linde all over. It's gas trailers. You can transport between 300 kilograms and 800, 900, 1,000 kilograms in a gas trailer. If you want to transport more, you liquefy the hydrogen and you go up to 3.5 tons per trailer. And again, that's different from country to country. In some countries you have larger trucks. And that's the highest density transport you can do. If you have extremely high volumes you want to transport, you can use pipelines. There are pipelines in Europe. There are 3 pipeline networks in Europe, but they are typically between industrial chemical areas. Mm-hmm. So they're not as much as the natural gas grid to all the households, to all the companies, to all the buildings.
Mm-hmm. Okay. When we get to the fueling question, there's all sorts of issues that we've discussed in the past. If we're talking about mobile applications, compressors are involved. What's the optimal size of the tank? How many bars and whatever? What are the issues that you are dealing with right now? And what forms of standardization is there right now? I mean, there are fueling stations that you're operating. Have they been standardized? Are you approaching volumes that are interesting right now?
So there are many different ways of standards, and I think, or in many different areas. There's a standard in the works about fuel quality, which is very important. There is a standard about, when it comes to passenger cars, about the geometry of the nozzle. And this is a worldwide standard, which is extremely helpful because this means the car manufacturers can put the same receptacle in their cars, no matter whether the car goes to California, to Japan, to France, or to the United Kingdom. There is a standard when it comes to car and bus fueling about the fueling protocol. How much gas do you push in, at what pressures, what is the pressure ramp, what are the temperatures? All that is standardized. Again, this is a worldwide standard, and this is a tremendous advantage over other technologies where people still within a country are battling over the standards, for example, for plugs for battery cars.
Yeah.
The station itself, I think the stations should not be standardized. Because that should be up to the competition between the different suppliers of hydrogen stations to really find the best solution for specific applications. What we have, for example, here in Germany with H2 Mobility, we have 4 size categories of stations. One is small, which is like probably the main size for the next couple of years, which means 160 kilograms per day. That translates into roughly 40 cars per day to be filled, 40 to 60 cars. Then there is very small, which is 80 kilograms. Then there is medium, which is 320, and then there is large, which is 700. Mm-hmm. But again, as demand grows, you can build it nearly as big as you want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. With the infrastructure that is being developed right now, I mean, it's always a question of volume. How many cars are on the road? And we've rather approached as a change in the industry. Everyone talks about this now. We're going into serial production of a hydrogen car. Is that already affecting the way you approach your models, or is it simply a question of you're celebrating?
It's not either or. It's both. Okay. So first of all, I think one of the main events since last year's Hannover Fair and this year's Hannover Fair really is that launch of the Toyota Mirai car in Japan. I think it is extremely encouraging that car has been taken up extremely well in the Japanese market. You may have been here in the morning when Andy Fuchs from Toyota said that they started with a production volume of 700 cars a year, and they've already sold 1,600 cars or so in the first couple of weeks after the production start of the car. So I think this is really important because let's be very clear about it. No matter how important the infrastructure is, no matter how much effort we put in the technology, in the financing of the infrastructure, at the end of the day, the fueling station just is a hygiene factor. It has to be there, it has to be within reach, it has to be ergonomic and conveniently. Of course, it has to be safe, that must be a given. It has to be economic. But nobody will buy such a car because they like the fueling station so much. Or has any one of you bought a car because you like the fueling station so much? You buy the car because you want such a car. Because that car either brings an emotional value to you, or it brings a very practical day-to-day value to you, or a mix of both. But people buy cars. People don't buy fueling stations. So having attractive cars out there is really extremely important. At the same time, whenever we talk about passenger cars, privately used passenger cars, people expect a certain coverage of the country, of the region they live in, with fueling stations. So we can't wait for the cars to come and then start building the infrastructure. We have to build the infrastructure first, at least to get a certain base coverage of country, of a region. And we're active in a number of initiatives. We're a member of the California Fuel Cell Partnership. They want to build 68 stations in the next couple of years, and 68 stations would give them a very good first coverage of the Bay Area, of the Los Angeles Basin, and the connecting highways. We're talking about 60 to 50 to 100 stations in Germany to get a first base coverage when private customers accept a hydrogen car as an alternative to their conventional cars. We're talking about 100 stations in Japan, and in the UK we're talking about around 70 stations to get that first base coverage. And that coverage needs to be out there, it needs to be financed. It's a very risky business, because if people don't like the cars, everyone who has invested will be sitting on those assets, and those assets will be stranded. But really the infrastructure has to come first, and then the cars. And as soon as you have enough cars out there and that base coverage of stations, then you can start building the stations in parallel with the car ramp up. And that's the second phase, and that's the phase when we expect more people to come in, because as soon as you got there, it's clear that it'll be a success. But the first phase is really the tricky one.
I should mention that Markus is willing to take questions from the audience if anyone does have a question. I'll run over with my microphone.
Thank you. I would like to ask about the price of a kilogram of hydrogen, the current price and the target price in the future.
Well, the current price, you mean we're at the station? It's again, it's different from country to country. Let's take Germany as an example. In Germany, we have agreed with all the partners in the Clean Energy Partnership. And the Clean Energy Partnership booth is down there. It's a really good booth. We have agreed that the retail price for hydrogen will be €9.50 per kilogram. And that includes 50% of renewable hydrogen, at least 50%, in some cases it's more. But please be aware that everyone is losing money on those €9.50. Because those stations are extremely underutilized. At the moment we have stations out there, it's 17 stations, so the fueling capacity is around 8,500 cars in Germany. And we actually have around 100 cars. So that shows you, and we have stations where we have one fill a day or two fills a day. And that's exactly that effect. The stations have to be out there first, and then the cars have to follow. It's not the other way around. So if you look at the numbers, if you look at the depreciation, if you would do the numbers, no station in the world, not even a gasoline station, could be profitable at 2 cars a day. So the current cost is of course much higher than those €9.50, no doubt about it. But everyone is aiming at diesel parity. So when you buy one of those cars, the fuel cost per 100 kilometers should be comparable to what you would be paying for a diesel car. That's the goal everyone is working against. And by the way, in Japan, the providers in Japan have announced prices between 1,000 and 1,100 yen per kilogram, which should be something like 8 to 9 euros as well, if you do the numbers.
The target price in the future. how much it would be?
I would take that 950 here as a comparison, and please always keep in mind that 1 kilogram, €9.50, gets you 100 kilometers. And I hope that the cars and the efficiency of the fuel cell improves as well. So I hope you will get more than 100 kilometers for that 1 kilogram in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, 7 years' time.
It sounds like a risk investment at first, but yet there are infrastructures that are, I'm thinking of buses particularly. There are certain areas right now in Germany where theoretically, according to European law, you should not be driving diesel vehicles. In the summer, there's too much Feinstaub, the particle dust, and the ozone issue. So there's environmental issues which sort of force the hand, but there are areas in Germany and in other countries where buses are already operating. Obviously, they have their filling stations. It must be a lot more economical to service one series of buses. Yep. But is the technology the same? Is it transferable? Can you literally take the fueling station for the bus, scale it down, and assemble it somewhere else and put it into service?
Yes, what we've done, because what Brian says about buses is absolutely true. When you have a bus, there's a number of advantages from an infrastructure perspective with a hydrogen bus. One is it's transit buses, so they always come back in the evening. So you only need one station to serve, say, a 50 or 100 buses. When you talk about passenger cars, we said we need 100 stations. And speaking in a very extreme way, before the first private customer buys such a car, you need to invest in 100 stations. So with buses, it's exactly the opposite way. And the other thing is that buses have much more travel time, 12, 14, 16 hours a day. They are not only emission-free in terms of particles, but they're also much lower noise. And I think that's a tremendous benefit for all the people, not just the people who drive the bus, because the drivers love them compared to diesel buses, not just for the people who ride the bus, but also for the people who live in the street where the buses are driving. So we are very, very engaged in bus projects. And to answer your question about the stations, in the past, wherever it was feasible, we always tried to build a combined bus and passenger car station. It's the same technology, it's different pressure levels, but you can really bring down the relative cost by combining it. And again, the Hamburg Hafen City Station is an example for a combined bus and passenger car station. There is a station in Bolzano at the Brenner Autobahn, which some of you may have seen. It's a very big one. It's also combined bus and passenger car. In AC Transit in Emeryville in California, at the east side of the Bay Area, we've built a combined bus and passenger car station. And there are many more examples of that. So whenever we can combine it, we do it.
Okay, we're almost running out of time here, but we should not fail to mention a product that you can be justly proud of, the series of fueling stations at the Energy Park. Could you briefly describe, you've got a quantity of fueling stations operating right now that is just thrilling to hear about.
Yeah. Well, first of all, before time is over, I'd be happy to see you at the Linde booth, which is up there, B77. We'll be around all week. So whenever you have more detailed questions, stop by. People will be there at the booth. So answering your question, I think one of the questions was, with the car industry ramping up serious production, what is Linde doing? What we did very much in a parallel fashion, we inaugurated summer last year a small series production facility in Vienna, where the ionic compressors are being manufactured. So we built, for our size, we built a relatively big manufacturing building, and we have started small series production in July last year. And this is really our, not a reaction to the car industry, but it's really, again, making sure that we are ready to build that infrastructure before the cars come. The other one you mentioned is Energiepark Mainz. And again, if you want more information about it, it's back at the booth. This is, at the moment, as we speak, it's being commissioned. It's a joint venture, it's a partnering project between Stadtwerke Mainz, which is the local utility, between Siemens, that supplies 3 electrolyzers, and between Linde, that supplies all the gas handling technology. And there will be, the base load will be 4 megawatts. those electrolyzers can be ramped up to 6 megawatts, really to cope with the fluctuating wind energy coming in. And we have two alternatives to use the gas. One is to feed the hydrogen into the natural gas grid and to use the storage capacity of the natural gas grid. And the other one is to put it on trailers and to ship it to the fueling stations. And that plant alone will give us hydrogen for approximately 1,300 passenger cars to fill around 1,300 passenger cars on a continuous basis.
Well, it's wonderful to hear those numbers rising and rising from year to year. Markus Bachmeier, Head of Hydrogen Solutions at the Linde Group, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Hope to see you back next year.
Brian, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you. We'll be back in 1 minute with another talk. We're going to be talking to Roberto Cremonese. He's CEO of CTS Energy, and he'll be talking about the hydrogen home, consuming your own hydrogen. So have a seat. The drinks are on the house. We'll be back in a minute. Mm-hmm.